Mr. Chairman, let me say I proudly support the amendment offered by Congressman Cleaver. And I'm really glad to hear my colleague from Ohio use the word consumer and say, if you put consumers back in it. Well, I think there's a reason you're hearing us say the Financial Consumers Protection Bureau. Many people actually did not understand, our constituents, when you say CFPB, they had no idea what you were talking about. Probably should make it a rule, Mr. Chairman, that you can't say initials. You have to say the entire word. So I think it's important for us to educate, as Congresswoman Waters said today, the public, and it's worth repeating all the millions of dollars that were saved. We talk about accountability, whether it's for operational or financial. 62 times Richard Cordray came before this body. It was not absent of talking about funding, talking about resources, talking about programs. I think it's also important to note in those 62 times that we brought Richard Cordray here, many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle called him an unaccountable bureaucrat. Well, let me just tell you the Richard Cordray that I know. The young kid who worked at McDonald's for $2.30. The young kid that went to an Ohio college. The young kid who studied everything he could to be a 5-time Jeopardy winner. The grown man who goes back home to his community and to be with his family and to be with those consumers. Is he perfect? Absolutely not. And we have taken him to task on this side of the aisle when there were mistakes. But I can tell you this amendment is something that I certainly support. And it was interesting as we talk about consumers. Earlier today, we talked about housing, and we talked about CDBG, and we talked about home and all the grants. And we heard many of the things that didn't happen as it relates to accountability and as it relates to service. Well, there's a theme here that's all built around consumers. And I'm really proud today, Mr. Chairman, and in the audience, I have the president of my county commissioners, Commissioner John O'Grady. And it's not by happenstance that he is here today in the audience. He is here because I consider him an expert in housing and in services. And when we heard about those dollars from the other side going to parks and not being used appropriately, I think it's very important for me to share that Franklin County is in the 100th percentile, best in the country, I might add, at leveraging HUD dollars like CDBG. For every dollar received, Franklin County leverages an additional $15 in investments in our neighborhood. Well, we want to protect those neighborhoods. So I think there is a direct linkage with what Democrats are trying to say here as we review our budget. They're all our consumers. And we have to stand with them and protect them, whether we're talking about services in our districts for housing or whether we're talking about protecting people through the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. You know, Mr. Chairman, at one time, people went to the Better Business Bureau when they wanted to redress any injustice against them. I can say now that people actually think about calling us and asking us where they can go, and we are sending them to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau because they help save lives. And so I just want to, again, salute my colleague for bringing this amendment forward, and I certainly will support this. And I urge my colleagues in the spirit of bipartisanship to think of ways that we can not just tear it apart, because like my colleague said, we all have constituents and we want to represent them and we want to do what's right for our consumers. I yield back the balance of my time.